Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our HashiCorp webinar, where today we'll be looking at how two Swedish multinational companies adopted Vault Enterprise. My name is Connor Beechnor, Senior Field Marketing Manager here at HashiCorp, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. And today I'm delighted to welcome two guest speakers. First up, we have Walter Lindblom from Zenseact, who are part of Volvo Cars. And today he is joined by Magnus Christiansen from Bold and Brave, who are a system integrator partner of HashiCorp. In terms of the agenda, Balder will start with a presentation on how Zenseact, who are part of Volvo Cars, are using Vault Enterprise to secure infrastructure and ensure integrity of their consumers. That will last for around 20 minutes, and then he'll open up for questions. After that, we'll hand over to Magnus, who will talk about a recent project for a global retail company based in Sweden and how they rolled out a common secrets management solution for global consumption that supports hybrid and multi-cloud workflows. Again, that should last for around 20 minutes, and we'll finish off with some Q&A. If you do have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box provided, and we'll answer those at the end of each session. You can also resize the presentation window and media player widgets at any time by clicking on the dragging on the corners of the box. Lastly, please note this webinar is being recorded, and we'll send it out to everyone via email after it's been processed, usually within a day or two. So with that, over to you, Balder.
Thank you. I just share my screen and make sure that works. Everything looks fine. Yeah. So hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about something we call repo-specific secrets, using Vault and CI/CD to offer custom secrets. My name is Balder Lindblom. I live in a house outside Kållered in Gothenburg with my wife and son. In my spare time, I enjoy kayaking, playing the cello, and being outdoors. Past experience, I have worked in everything from customer support, done military missions in Afghanistan and Chad, worked as a testing consultant, security engineer, and now I work with DevOps as part of the CI/CD framework at Zenseact, where I work. Zenseact used to be a part of Zenuity, which was a company started by Autoliv and Volvo a couple of years ago. Is in 2 sites in China and Sweden. We have 11 car brand deployments with our code, and we're hiring. So go to careers.zenseact.com if you're curious about that. And when we wanted to do a lot of this stuff, we chose the Vault. And began with open source, and we have now moved over to enterprise when they're scaling up. We'll talk more about that later. So the background of what we needed to use the Vault for, why are we here? We had basically started off with our DevOps needs, where we were rolling out internal services, and it was obvious early on that we wanted to have some sort of way of doing secrets management. There are other options, of course. You can use Ansible Vault or others, but we thought it would be nice to have a scalable way of doing this. Then in the CI, we have some secrets management in GoCD and Jenkins, where we're using environment variables and secrets to pass things through. But we realized that none of those were good as a single source of truth, because it's not that easy to use the APIs to get them from there. And they also needed to be redeployed quite often as services, because we have a fast rate of change, and redeploying secret management it's a bit scary to do too often, because you don't want to lose your secrets, obviously. So repo-specific secrets was how we wanted to offer the entire company a simple way of having custom secrets for their repos. So in the CI chain, if you have a pipeline running, we wanted to be able to offer the organization an easy way to get access to secrets that they didn't have to share with everyone else. So what are we running? Or what were we running before we had the Vault as part of the CI? Well, we have a source control system in Gerrit Git and we're using Jenkins and Zool to run pre-merge checks, as we call them. Then we have GoCD, where we run the post-merge checks. And then we have quite a few things that are used as resources for that. And we brought in the Vault at this point as part of the GoCD pipelines. That's where we decided that this is a good place to start to give access to everyone to these things. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to ask them, and I'll try to address them if I can see them. Because we're starting to get into the woods a bit now. So this is what we decided to try to implement. I don't know, I'm aware there's a lot of text here, but we'll get through everything a bit. So we have a couple of different repos that set up the CI system, and we realized we wanted to have some scripts in them to integrate towards that CI. And to ensure that we have a fairly good way of maintaining separation of duties and not having like a super account that does everything, we decided to use app roles within the Vault infrastructure and have quite a few different duties. So I'll talk more about the policy for these roles later on, but they're basically set up in a couple of different ones. We have the Orchestrator role. The purpose of the Orchestrator role is to set up these things over here. So whenever we want to do a new implementation of this repo-specific secrets, we ask people to change the refs meta config inside of Gerrit. When they do that, and we run the pipelines for creation of the repo-specific secrets part, we create an app role for the project for the different roles. We make sure that we have an alias inside the Vault so that the owners that we already have as a group in the AD, that they are allowed to log into the Vault and insert and edit secrets that they might have. We create all the policies for the specific repo, and we make sure that we have the correct policies in place for the different things. Then we return all the app role IDs and everything into the CI so that it has awareness of them. So in GoCD, which was the first one, we were thinking of doing this in Jenkins, but we haven't yet gone there. In GoCD, we have quite a few different pipelines, and basically we recursively add these role IDs and so on to them. And the thing we distribute is what we call the setup role with both the app role ID and the setup secret ID. And then we give out the job role ID, as we call it, the repo role ID. And the setup role is used to basically get a one-time secret ID for the job role once we get in here, in the job init here. So that's the important part of it. So that means that if you got a full state of our CI, then you wouldn't be able to get any secrets from inside the CI that would give you immediate access to secrets. You would have to either use the Orchestrator role to generate something of your own or something different like that. And we know the pattern, so it's easy to write pattern recognition to make sure that we see when people are doing things poorly in the audit, which is important to us. Then we actually get into the job, which is being run in GoCD. We basically have a job init script that connects to the Vault, fetches the job secret ID, that is what we pass over to the people running their jobs. Then it deletes all the other things. So that's what we do here. So going into the weeds a bit, this is what we then have as a separation. So these are the actual policies. This one is cut because there's more or less a mirror one for the GUI, which is to the metadata path. But we don't need to look into that because it's not that interesting. So the orchestrator is allowed to check what capabilities are here in the sysauth part. It can create new identities, and the reason it needs to do that is to be able to map the application group we have in the Active Directory that are the owners for the Gerrit repo to the policies of the owner role. Then we create the app roles, which also needs to be able to be done using this one, and we can create and update policies. So that's what the orchestrator was. So this is quite a powerful role. And the reason why we use a namespace specifically for CI is to make sure that this role only has access to give policy access to anything that is in the CI. Then we have the owner role. This is what we give to everyone in the Active Directory who's part of the owner. And that's basically being able to recursively read. In this example, the name of the Git repo is DT services secrets. And we recursively add, so it's possible to have secrets on multiple layers. So you can have, like, if you know that you have multiple services in Gerrit in this case, you can have secrets that are shared in between the services, and you know that the policies automatically give access to that. And but we don't allow anything on this in other nodes. This plus here is a nice little feature of the Vault where you give access to this level, but not recursively downward. It's unfortunately not that well documented, but it's available when you need it. This is the setup role. So this is the one that is generating a job secret ID for the actual job when it's being run. So this has a very limited reach, and this is what we spread out the most in the GoCD. So in all of the pipelines belonging to a repo, the credentials for the setup role are stored permanently. But the only thing you can do with that is generate a new secret ID. Then you have to figure out the role ID for this one as well later on. Then we have the job role. And the job role is what is being used from the CI, so we don't give it any permissions to edit secrets. It's just allowed to list and read them. The nice thing is that when we set up service accounts to have this sort of thing as well, it will be possible to use a service account credential locally to check these things. Also, if you want to generate a token yourself with a specific policy, which you're allowed to do generally, as long as it's less powerful than your own, then you can generate a token with this policy and try it out locally without being in the CI. So that was a very important part of how we did this. We wanted to make sure that people could run jobs locally as if they were in CI. That's why we have this whole thing of making sure that it's transparent to the users what we're doing. So how did we improve doing this? With Artifactory, we have our own in-house retention and permission engine, which we call Articonf. And this gives permissions to users or access groups within the AD or service accounts directly to specific paths of a repo in Artifactory. And we've had this in place for a long time, but we didn't have a good way of being able to store credentials. So suddenly when we have the secrets management in place on a repo level, we could actually request that all the users use their own service accounts to access the Artifactory instance, which means that we don't have to worry about people overwriting stuff in between different paths. We don't have to worry about any of that stuff. We can basically tell people, we give you this possibility to do self-service. And by giving you that possibility, we decrease the load on how much we have to maintain within the application itself, but it also increased the transparency, so it's easy for anyone to check what's going on. But that was a missing key of the puzzle there, was secrets management, because without that, we weren't able to use it actively within the CI. Self-service, when it comes to these sort of things, I think is incredibly important, because there are things that we wouldn't have been able to predict, but some of the things we have been able to predict that have been happening are things like Slack tokens, where we had to tell people, well, you shouldn't store those in Gerrit, they're secrets. And then people would say, well, where should I store them? So I can access them from a CI setting and send notifications to my team that it's done. And we have to be honest and say, well, we don't have a good place of storing them. And now we do. So now we can tell them, don't store this stuff in Gerrit. If you have a secret, put it in the Vault, and you can access it that way. And that means that any sort of integration people want to do, they can use self-service to set up. Deployment is another interesting part that specifically for us working with DevOps is that we used to be in a situation where we almost had to run our Ansible playbooks from a local computer using our local credentials to be able to escalate our privileges to do things on the servers. But now we can, using Ansible from within our CI, without having to share credentials everywhere. Another solution we had previously was to have a separate instance of GoCD where we would have environment variables, and then we wouldn't give anyone else outside our own teams access to that GoCD instance. But when it comes to eating your own dog food, that is tricky. So now we can store it in the vault, and we can fix these things. So what's in the future for us, for the vault, and what we are hoping to do? Well, the first thing we did quite recently in some minds, but we've had it for a while now, is we got the enterprise license. And there are basically two main features of the enterprise license which we are currently making great use of. One is namespaces, where we know that we can be admins of our own namespace, and we can make sure that this namespace is being used for the CI, and hence the security concerns within that namespace are only in a CI context. So the orchestrator role, for example, we know that we're giving access to CI to rewrite policies in the entire namespace. And if we only had one, if we had the open source vault and we basically gave away the keys to the kingdom to rewrite policies, we'd be a bit worried, to be honest. I would anyway. But by doing it this way, we know that, well, if someone else wants to store things in the vault in the future, they could potentially get a separate namespace and we wouldn't have to worry about what we're doing there. The other part is that I must say that HashiCorp has excellent support. We've had some issues with certificates expiring, and we had some network issues which we couldn't track immediately. And when we did that, we got in touch with support, and within, I think, 15 or 30 minutes, we were in a Zoom call with some of the experts within the area. And that's incredibly helpful to know that when you get stuck and you don't understand what's going on, there are people to rely on. And HashiCorp has a lot of excellent documentation, but because there is so much of it, it's not always entirely up to date in all contexts. But when you get in touch with support, they know what the latest and greatest is, and they also know what might be an artifact of you using a slightly older version of the vault or whatever. So that's an important part. The next thing we're going to do is to harden the service. We're in the process of doing that right now, setting up this service has previously was supposed to be managed by IT, but in the end, the traditional IT organization did not have full understanding of the needs when it comes to this sort of tool. So it's been moved over to the DevOps team I'm working in. So we're going to use the same framework as we have for Gerrit and GoCD and other applications to set up the secrets management part. We're making good headway with that right now, and that's really nice to know that we can then do things like exchanging certificates using our Ansible playbooks. It is possible, you just have to think properly about what you do with key holdings and so on, and make sure you revoke those root tokens. But in general, I'd say that secrets management is a missing link. I mean, there are other great features of the Vault that we might be going into in the future. We talked about maybe using it for encryption data streams, or potentially to have like the possibility to send out passwords with a one-time encryption key. It's also quite usable in the Vault because that means that we can send things out. For example, using that to send out service account passwords instead of email would be a nice thing to do in the future. But I'd say that secrets management is such an important missing link in many situations where it's like, oh, we wish we could do this, and you might not realize that secrets management is what is blocking you from doing this in an automated fashion, but in many ways it might be. And specifically if you have a proactive security department where they might want to screen for things. And I mean, we all know how engineers are. We try to find solutions to problems when we see them. And by having this tool where you can do things in a proper way, we don't have to worry as much about the engineers within the company making up solutions that will potentially be a security risk, such as, for example, storing tokens or credentials directly inside a Git repo that everyone in the company has access to. People did that because they had no choice. But when we give them a choice, they don't want to do that anymore. And that makes us good friends with the security department as well. And that's always nice when we can work together to get a better environment and not have to worry about these things doing poorly. So that concludes what I was going to do in this presentation, because I wanted to leave some more time for questions. So far, I've only seen one from Jonathan, which I tried to answer. If you have any more questions, please write them in the Q&A. I have all the code available as well, so if you want to have specific examples of anything, I've been authorized to share that with you. So go ahead and ask. We are not using auto unseal at the moment. The way we're setting it up in Ansible is that we have an initial playbook where we unseal using the initial root token and key, and then we do a rekey operation as part of the Ansible playbook where we get the PGP public keys from Keybase to encrypt all the key fragments. And in general, what we try to do with the unsealing is that we have enough people, enough fragments, and a lower level, so that if we do get a seal for unforeseen reasons, we can unseal fairly quickly. We've been working with this for, I think, 2 years now. We've had very few unintentional. I think it sealed itself once when we had some restarts of the VMs. So that's the situation. So what level of security requirements do we have on the company? Well, we try to be agile about the whole thing. So we have a head of security, which we have a good relationship with, and we try to make sure that we do things the most important things first. But we're not a banking industry or anything like that. There's no regulation regarding the security. So we can allow people to try out things. So the way we work as a company is generally we're giving quite a lot of permissions to people early on. And then as we realize we need to tighten things up, then we've had a great understanding from the developer community that that needs to be done. So we hope to continue that way. Yeah, the problem with the code I'm allowed to share in this context, I don't think it's going to be meaningful to open source it entirely, because it's very well integrated with the entire CI system we have. But if there are any specific things you'd like to know about what we solve different things, we're using HVAC a lot. To do the initialization through all this. So another question about how to share a secret within GCP Terraform Vault. Oh, currently we're not using Terraform GCP in this context. We're building our own essentially by using GoCD to log in using app roles and then retrieving secrets that way.
All right, Valda, I think let's pause on those questions until afterwards. Obviously, any questions that you do think of in the meantime, feel free to put those in the chat. But I think now is a nice time to hand over to Magnus. So over to you, Magnus.
Thanks a lot, Connor, and thanks a lot, Balder. So let's see if we can navigate. Cool, great. Just to sort of add up on what Balder said, some things I picked up there that made a lot of sense. I mean, we're talking a lot about the developer experience, and I think Balder mentioned that a lot as well. So having this as a easy to consume service, and I mean, as Balder mentioned as well, I mean, developers make things work, right? But if there are like a very good, like a central offering, making the thing even better, I think you see that developers tend to pick that up, so they can focus more on their stuff rather on the sort of the abstracted things that sort of just should be around and should work. So that's just sort of my ideas on that. So hello. So I will talk a little bit, Magnus Christiansson. I will talk a little bit about integrating Vault Enterprise to an engineering platform. So probably I will zoom out a little bit from Balder's good speech. But I think talking about integration of Vault and Vault Enterprise in a large enterprise is sort of hard to talk about that isolated. So I will start kicking this off, zooming out a little bit, giving some perspective and sort of looking into what type of design principles and what goes into an engineering platform at this company. So Magnus Christiansson, that's me. I'm a developer, DevOps guy at a digital agency called Bold and Brave, which Connor mentioned as well, is a system integrator partner to HashiCorp. And so this presentation will not be so much about Bold and Brave. It will be focusing on a longer assignment where we have been working with a large international retail company in order to provide an engineering platform and the concepts of that, designing that, building that, and obviously focusing on the integration of Vault Enterprise into that. And just as Balder mentioned, feel free to write the questions in the chat, and if I don't pick them up, maybe Connor can help out with that. It's perfectly fine to interrupt throughout the session. But that's basically it. So talking a little bit about zooming out a little bit, what we're trying to build into the platform, and going into the capabilities of secret and crypto management. Why Vault is a good fit for this company, and sort of the adoption journey that we're doing, and a little bit on the outcome. That will be the main topics. So zooming out a little bit then. So at this assignment, supporting the engineers and product teams with an engineering platform. So zooming out a little bit here. This is a large enterprise company, as I said, a huge number of engineers, ranging from pure developers, DevOps roles, DevOps persons, and data scientists. It's product teams globally, with like global functions, but also specific teams for specific markets. And the type of products that these teams are serving, it is customer-facing products, obviously, a lot of those globally, and also system-oriented products, that's sort of like internal products within the enterprise. The teams are typically, I think I will mention autonomy a lot throughout the session, so bear with me on that, but that's a key cornerstone in this. And the teams are set up as cross-functional and fully accountable. And we have multiple sites. The client have multiple sites around the world. So diverse IT landscape, I mean, that goes, I guess, for most larger enterprises. I mean, it's different reasons for it. We need the diversity in order to fit the workloads and the use cases in a good way. But obviously, there is a lot of legacy involved here as well. sort of a good mix between public, private cloud, and data centers, and very much like bare metal environments. And the applications, I mean, it's not like, there's a lot of critical systems running on-premise, like in more monolith-like systems, which need to be treated in a good way. And I think that goes also into a lot of these discussions today, sort of how can we serve this diverse IT landscape in a good way? How can sort of this engineering platform serve modernization? How can we serve hybrid and multi-cloud use cases? The software ecosystem, so this is really the movement, what is going on. It is about focusing more on like focused purposed microservices and combining those together to provide like overall digital experiences. Focusing a lot more on open source in the software supply chain and in the software itself, and heavily practicing inner source within the company. And focus is transforming a lot over to build the own software, focusing on building own software based on open source for use cases, business use cases where the customer wants to differentiate, and purchasing software and services as a commodity. So that's sort of a principle going through this. So let's go into a little bit more about like the guiding stars in IT work at the client, and sort of design principles for building such a platform. Team autonomy and accountability, as I mentioned in previous slide, that is central in everything that we do. That's sort of like, really the guiding star here. And that could sort of contradict, you think, with the standardization bullet on the second one. But definitely it's a mature company, and it understands that there needs to be some sort of balance between team autonomy and sort of doing things your own way, as Baldur mentioned, or things that are standardized. And those things could be like infrastructure, it could be technology chosen practices. So finding that mix is sort of a message that I want to get through in this session. And I write economies of scale. I mean, as mentioned on previous slides, sort of the volume here. I mean, the number of customers, the number of engineers, number of products, their sort of their need for building. We're sort of having this movement on software ecosystem. It doesn't make sense to that everyone does everything. We need to sort of focus on a good platform that can serve and scale to craziness, really, right? We want to be able to scale this, and scalability is like the key factor here in the setup as well. So having a shared platform serving 100 teams, 200 teams, maybe 300 teams. Everything as code. That's a key one as well. Being able to have a single source of truth for everything we do within IT. Automation, resilience. Try to remove manual steps. Baldur was mentioning self-serving. That's one example, obviously, but it's also how we are building deployment pipelines within the client, and making sure that we have the capabilities to experiment, to get things out quickly into production, and have good practices for measuring the outcome, and be able to act upon that. And as I mentioned in previous as well, enabling application modernization, since this is coming from a traditional setup, very process-oriented. There is definitely a lot of like large monoliths, a lot of legacy, so to say, applications. But I mean, legacies sometimes have like a bad reputation. Maybe it should have, but still, I mean, as I said as well, it's serving a lot of critical workflows within the company. So I mean, treating those with a lot of care is really important, and sort of enabling. I think enabling is a key concept here. It's about enabling product teams to be able to start modernizing also the legacy application, not like lift and shift, but rather taking this step by step and having an engineering platform supporting those use cases. And then, as Balder mentioned as well, security built in by default. I mean, this is so important for the client centrally to have this in place, and sort of confidence, and also confidence for the product teams because product teams want to make things the right way from an enterprise point of view. But we need to make sure that we have a security built into the platform, so it's easy for the teams to consume, and it's easy for the teams to do the right thing. I see some comment about the slides are not changing. Is that Connor? Can you?
Yeah, so everything's working properly. If you are having any issues, just try refreshing your browser, and these slides should show in the slides widget.
Okay, cool. But it looks all right on your side at least. Okay, cool. Yeah. So those are so type of like the guiding stars for the work we do. So a lot of zooming out has been done. We try to bear with me, trying to get there. I mean, autonomy being such a key in this, and I mean, autonomy provides the flexibility and innovation, and is so central to have as a like guiding star for the teams. But how does autonomy really relate to speed? I think our experience running like IT transformation and operations at scale at a high pace is that over time, having like full autonomy for the teams will make the ecosystem over time very much fragmented and very complex. And as this quote that I found, it's from the Backstage IO site, the Spotify's developer portal, which I can recommend you to look at. So we try to build an ecosystem here, not a wilderness. So I mean, at the scale we're running, we need to be cautious about finding this balance between autonomy for the teams and sort of standardizing stuff. So what could happen with full autonomy and at high pace and scale is sort of that you not get the speed that you're looking for in autonomy. You may got the innovation, but it actually potentially, and that's sort of the insight that we have been experiencing a lot, is that it can slow things down. So it's sort of a speed paradox, you could say that. I mean, you want to go for autonomy, for the innovation, for the speed, but in a larger company, maybe not at a startup, you need to consider finding this sweet spot between sort of autonomy and standardization. So by standardizing tooling, centralizing services, streamlining the software development lifecycle end to end, it is our experience saying that that's not actually restricting autonomy. Instead, the standardization is reducing complexity for engineers. So that means that the teams can focus more on their products rather than like the basic sort of abstracting away some of the complexity, for example, related to infrastructure and automation. And sort of if your product team 1, 2, or 3, there is definitely patterns in those that are more or less the same. So by having a competent platform, you're able to have the teams focusing more on the right stuff and really like reducing the cognitive load for the teams. So even if they are cross-functional teams, they can focus more on what differentiates their product rather than focusing sort of reinventing the wheel from first day. And also it relates to, in the scaling part, obviously to sourcing, how to find these teams that can do everything fully cross-functional. And also in a large company, there is a metric that we use, like time to first commit. When there are new people coming in, how do you make sure that they are productive as quickly as possible, sort of finding the way through the software ecosystem. But having all this said, the standardization itself, that requires a lot of leadership and actually taking decisions. And so that is needed in order to get that fine balance. And it is a balance for sure. And this is just, I think, a good quote from the dear Gregor Hope. Nice person to follow. Like excessive complexity is nature's punishment of organizations that are unable to make decisions. So if you want all the flexibility all the time, you likely get nothing. So that's a nice way to put it, I think. And also, it's not always about taking like decisions that will stay forever, but actually take decisions. And I mean, sometimes it's more important to take the decisions than taking the perfect decision, but actually having something that works out. And I mean, you have like the myriad of options when it comes to technology, tooling, and practices. So, and sometimes the decisions you take is not the important thing. The important thing is that you indeed take a decision and not sort of just stay organic. So getting there, providing an engineering platform at a larger enterprise. These are bullets that I tried to sort of compile for this. We're talking about providing a central engineering capabilities, scaling to enterprise requirements. So this is not talking too much about vendor tooling themselves. It's about capabilities needed in order to develop, build, and deploy to customers digital experiences. So try to talking more about capabilities rather than tool by tool. And the engineering platform is a broad platform, and there's a lot of different teams putting in their stuff into that platform, and it covers development tooling, infrastructure, CI/CD, monitoring, security test, among other things. And I mean, a key factor here is actually reducing the cognitive load for the teams. So the teams can focus more on what is differentiating their product. And developer experience is really key here, and that goes from everything to doing the right technology choices in the platform, having a transparent platform where the teams feel they can contribute, that it's robust, that it's well performing, and a large portion of transparency. So it's considered as the company's portal, not something that like a black box where which the teams are using. And it's a fine balance here, because the teams want to focus on the right stuff. So they are okay with having some things abstracted away. So it's a fine balance here between abstracting things away for the teams, reducing the complexity, but also providing the flexibility. And we also found in this that just by having a platform consisting of tools, that just takes us a little bit down the path on this. But by actually doing more in this related to automation, integration, and providing the leadership in the area by having an opinionated offering, that serves the engineers and the product teams in a much better way. And the last bullet here is about obviously we are not doing this sort of in a silo. Everything that we put into the platform, the capabilities is well aligned with the technology and business strategy of the company. So looking into a little bit of the platform that makes sense here. So back to what we said about core focus of the platform is definitely to enable application modernization and be able to serve hybrid and multi-cloud use cases. So looking into a few of these capabilities that sort of have a similar setup, sort of providing like the networking and like based capabilities that are abstracting complexity away for the teams when it comes to having a service mesh. That means that you have like connectivity and network automation throughout the client's network, regardless if that is workloads running on data centers, private clouds, public clouds. So you sort of get like a seamless integration and uniform experience when it comes to connectivity and service discovery. And also there is the concept of event mesh. That's sort of similar to the service mesh in that sense, but that we have in the platform a uniform way to manage asynchronous messaging throughout the client's network, regardless of where the workload is. And also data mesh, business data, how do we manage that in a good way? How do we uniformly access that data, for example, for data scientists or other applications to use in a coherent way? And then finally coming into the Vault part here with secrets and crypto management. So it's sort of similar in that sense, that capability to the other ones, because you need them together and sort of you want to have that developer experience, that having that uniform experience when it comes to how to manage secrets and cryptos regardless of where your workloads are. So just try to compile a list of, how are we on time here? Okay, speeding up a little bit. Reasons for Vault Enterprise. I have been talking a little bit about those. We want to have a robust and uniform enterprise secrets and crypto practices throughout the software development lifecycle, not just CI/CD, but definitely for run use cases as well. Probably over time the most common use case actually. And it's API driven, and it has a really nice abstraction level that fits our setup. It is flexible in a way that we can have this working together with other things that we have in the platform, but also important for the autonomy in the teams. If the teams are deciding to go for other technology, it is very nice and easy to integrate. And it has a large community adoption and a large number of integrations. And just as Balder mentioned, there's been a lot of adoption by the client on open source Vault before. But taking this step and making it sort of going from distributed to centralized, that it was a natural thing to go to the enterprise. Actually, the only way forward if we wanted to continue on Vault. It has good capabilities on audit and telemetry, and it's secrets and crypto management in software, which is really nice and portable, and fits the smart infrastructure setup of the client. And also important, obviously, in order to go for this, going into the platform, is that it has the mechanisms, capabilities to serve high availability and procedures for disaster recovery, and not mentioned here, obviously the support as well, which up to this point has been awesome. So this is the current setup the client has. There are two high availability clusters with a disaster recovery cluster set up. So it's a multi-site setup now, serving public clouds, geographically serving the company's current needs. So it's sort of it's a network of clusters that we are building up. We'll see on the adoption journey also where we are, but there is definitely ideas to have these capability of secrets management, sort of covering the same, building the same sort of topology as we are doing for the service mesh and the data mesh, service mesh and the event mesh. So the current setup is on public clouds. It's running on Kubernetes, and we have plans to continue adding clusters actually close to where our consumers are, where the workloads are, in order to serve for like modernization work, hybrid use cases, multi-cloud use cases. All right, running late a little bit maybe. So just a little bit, I think you will get the recording as Connor said, so you can go into the details here, but just a little bit on the adoption journey that we are on, obviously. So the early stages, we set this up as a trial internally, sort of reaching out to the teams that are using Vault already, like the open source Vault, looking into their requirements and sort of trying to validate the hypothesis of having this using enterprise and having more as a central setup. So we set up a high availability single site on Kubernetes and having everything described as code, and setting up some default authentication backend for serving teams, first serving the teams with sign-on, and setting up already early, having immutable builds for this and using the good features of Kubernetes using rolling deployment. So that sort of was hygiene factors that we set up out of the box. And then sort of similar to what Baldur said, like initial use cases starting off with was a lot of CI/CD use cases. So sort of how to avoid having tokens and credentials in logs, exposed in logs, or even in repos. Sort of how can you integrate Vault into your deployment pipelines. And the next step, when we actually went from crawling to walking, going into production or go live, we were setting up auto on-sealing, since it's good supported for the public clouds that we're using. But we still need to have like management of recovery keys, and that is set up, sort of the procedure around that. Obviously setting up the DR cluster, sort of a prereq in order to go into production. And also I think is stressing the operations playbook. I mean, this typically gets, I mean, it's a fine balance between when you want to have distributed setup and central setup, but in the central setup, obviously things can go wrong, and over time probably will do. So we need to have like a really in detail playbook in sort of both like a regular application management, like key rotation, but also nice procedures, how to do promotion to a DR cluster, for example. So that is when the shit hits the fan, we know what to do. And it's not just having that documented, it's about rehearsing that as well, for sure. And hardening of the infrastructure, like a no-brainer to get that in place. And also telemetry and audit logging, that is so key to have in place, maybe especially the audit logging, so we can see what's going on, and we can track back in time to what type of access to Vault has been done in very high granularity. And starting to use the policies and using also dynamic policies using Sentinel. It's a really awesome enterprise feature. And also trying to add run use cases as well. So if the crawl was more CI/CD use cases, now going into production, going live, we are definitely onboarding teams using this for accessing secrets in runtimes. And that could be everything from data specific for the application, or like configurations for the application that needs to be fetched from the workloads. And next step, the run step, that's sort of where we are. We are setting up multi-site. We talked about that. Managing the application management, sort of the planned work with key rotation to make sure that that happens in time according to our operations playbook. And also rehearsing on DR promotion. We haven't actually done one in production, but rehearsing so we know sort of when that should be triggered and how step by step to do it, and have that as automated as possible. And also last thing to mention here is the Golden Path integrated offering. So that's typically back to what I talked about in the building and engineering platform, that it's not just about providing tool X, Y, Z. It's about providing a really good developer experience. So building something that is sort of larger than the sum of the pieces in the platform. So making it easier for teams to, for example, set up a microservice, having things onboarded to the tools and namespaces you need, and having it as a really good developer experience. And so the teams can focus rather on what differentiates their product, rather than sort of doing the hygiene stuff and doing like the one-on-one plumbing of tooling. So that's work that is underway. Last slide. I'm sure. So just some key benefits outcome. I think during this time, it's been a challenge for sure to do it, and at a large company to get these type of things through. But it has definitely, we see that we have improved the secrets and crypto management practices and postures across the IT landscape. And that's also back to that, if there is this type of a central relevant offering for the teams with a good abstraction level, teams will use it because teams just want to do it the right way, and they want to focus on sort of their stuff rather than the hygiene stuff. And it's definitely meant that the teams don't have to find their own solutions for this, best to their knowledge. So it's reducing complexity, cognitive load for the teams, so they can focus on the right stuffs. And it also makes us more confident when it comes to security audits and compliance, different product teams with different compliance needs. And as I said a few times as well, it's enabling the application modernization work in the teams. So if this type of infrastructure is in place, the teams can focus on how, at a larger speed, being able to sort of break up their monoliths and start moving things into private, public cloud as their needs are. And last one is very critical and sort of a prereq to go into this is high availability setup. Combined with the support that we get from HashiCorp. So obviously there is with these centralized services, you get the high demand on availability. It's not just CI/CD, it's actually run workloads that are expecting the secrets to be fetched, otherwise the service will be down. So I mean, the service level on this will never be higher than this, and sort of the capabilities of the product is covering our needs here very well. 10:58. So sorry for running over a few minutes. I haven't really looked at the chat on this session, but if you have questions, I'm glad to use the time now for it. Or you can always, if you want to discuss Vault, you can definitely contact me or the company or HashiCorp, obviously, for further discussions and collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you, Magnus. And just one question that's come through. I see Balder's answered it already, but keen to hear your perspective as well. The question is, do you have any use cases of implementing inheritance in Vault, basically to handle default values that recursively get overridden by more specific default values?
That's a good point. We don't have that today. I was thinking about policies. We have some default policies that we are provisioning out into namespaces, but that's something else. But no inheritance like that today.
No problem. All right. So if there aren't any other questions, we can wrap up. So Magnus, Balder, thank you so much for your excellent presentations. And with that, if you do fancy learning more about HashiCorp Vault, then I really encourage you to check out our online learning platform where you can try some of these features for yourself. And you can find that at learn.hashicorp.com/vault. And just a reminder, this webinar was recorded and we will make that recording available on our website after it's been processed within the next 24 hours. I'll send you a link by email once it's ready as well. Okay, so I hope everyone enjoyed today's session and thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.